Amazing. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Of course. Thank you for joining us. And we're looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your contribution to the book, The Losses We Keep. But before we even get into that conversation, do you want to take a minute and just introduce yourself to the Age Tickler community?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Samantha Bonizzi, and just a little bit about this project. So I'm a co-author on a book called The Losses We Keep. It's about it's a compilation of stories from 9 women who have undergone challenges related to infertility, pregnancy loss, and really just meant to be a beacon of hope for others who are kind of undergoing similar challenges. So yeah, that's kind of what we're here to talk about. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for joining and for your willingness to share. And my first question for you is, I guess, as you just mentioned that you co-authored, I know that it is a big step to go from experiencing your journey, sharing it with family and friends, to being willing to share it publicly. Do you want to share a little bit with us what motivated you to take your story as this, as you called, a beacon of hope to help others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had journaled throughout my entire fertility experience, and that was really something that got me through that time. And I always knew that I wanted to use those journal entries to share my stories with others. And when I was connected with the lead author, Jamie, I really wasn't sure if it was the right time for me to do that. I was still very much in the thick of it when it comes to IVF. And, I guess hadn't reached quote unquote my happy ending yet. So it was a big decision to kind of take the plunge and join this project. But ultimately, I felt like it was the right opportunity. And I really just believed in what Jamie was trying to achieve with this book. It was something that I really needed when I was going through it. Just having the ability to hear that there are other women who've gotten on the other side of this. I didn't really have anybody in my immediate circle who had been through anything remotely similar. So it was always hard for me to find that connection. So yeah, I decided to share my story with this book right before I was transferring for IVF. So the timing of it was very surreal because basically I agreed to do it, and then I found out I was pregnant, and then was writing throughout my entire pregnancy. And the book was released just shy of a month before my daughter was born. So
Wow.
it was ultimately a really therapeutic way to kind of get through that pregnancy. Pregnancy after loss is very challenging when all of the fear and anxiety that comes along with it. So yeah, I was happy to kind of have that outlet.
Definitely. And yeah, it is definitely a very intense, anxiety provoking time. What would you recommend to individuals who are thinking about whether it is to share it more publicly or even just as you explained that you were journaling throughout your journey? What would you recommend to others who are contemplating starting to write down their own experiences?
Yeah, I would say whether you're journaling or you're writing to share with others, start with just sort of a steady stream of consciousness, just get everything out on the page. I think that's especially important for when you're journaling, just to get everything out. But also equally when you're, planning to share your story, I think it's always best to start with more and you could pull back from there, but really just don't hold back, whether it's just for yourself or for others.
That's beautiful. Are there any prompts, journaling prompts that you found to be most meaningful to help you as you processed through that you would want to share with others?
I think just when I started writing this chapter, I took a lot of time to go back into my journal entries. And then the one that really stuck with me and I actually included in my chapter was this letter that I wrote to myself, a former self of mine, uh, the one who had just experienced her first pregnancy loss,
Mhm.
just kind of talking to my former self and what I would say to her. So I think that's something, and I think someone even suggested I did that, and I found that to be really therapeutic.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure a very healing process to be able to, in hindsight, look at the experience and see all that you've grown in that time and be able to give yourself the advice and hold yourself in a way that no one else can do for you.
Yeah,
That's so beautiful.
exactly.
Thank you for sharing that. Um, do you want to share a little bit with us about your journey?
Yeah. So my husband and I, we set out to try to have a baby, and we didn't anticipate, we would have any issues. We got pregnant fairly quickly the first time. And, we were over the moon, so excited. Um, Around like 8, 9 weeks, we started to tell some close family and friends. And, I think we were kind of naive around everything. Of course, you hear about miscarriage. But especially for me, I didn't, like I said, I didn't have anyone close to me who had gone through anything like that. So I guess it was just kind of off my radar a little bit. Um, and I also didn't understand the concept of a miscarriage. I always imagined a miscarriage as something that happens, while you're at home and you see blood and you kind of know right away that it's happened, which wasn't my experience. So unfortunately, we went in around 12, 13 weeks for genetic testing. And in that ultrasound is where we found out that we had experienced a loss. And, we essentially didn't know why it had happened. Again, it was a miscarriage. So there was, we had no idea when it had happened exactly. The doctors couldn't really tell us. So, we ended up getting a D&C, which basically just means that the doctors goes in, does a procedure, removes the tissue. And for us, that indicated there was a genetic problem with the fetus. So we had that information. But at that point, with just one loss, my doctor just recommended that we start trying again right away. That was kind of it.
Mhm.
There was not much else to the conversation. And it's just kind of amazing that, there isn't much discussion around how you should sort of heal and recoup. It's just kind of like, okay, when you're ready, just try again, which is what we did. And we got pregnant again fairly quickly. I think it was just 3 months later. So, I was very nervous with that
Mhm.
pregnancy, of course, but I just didn't think that it would happen to us again.
Sure.
The statistics around recurring pregnancy loss, it's so small of a chance that it would happen. So, I believed, okay, we paid our dues, right? Like this surely can't happen to us again. So I was cautiously optimistic, even though there were a few signs from the doctor that basically we had to keep going back every 2 weeks to see if this was going to be a pregnancy that stuck. He did inform us around 8 weeks this time that it was not a viable pregnancy. So it was the same thing. Went in for an ultrasound and found out in that appointment that, we weren't carrying a viable pregnancy. So it was at that point, and I think that one really struck me almost even harder than the first. I was more angry that at that point because, again, I was like, why is this happening to us? Why can't we have a pregnancy that sticks? Why, everyone around me is getting pregnant. Why is this happening?
Definitely.
So, it was a lot of anger that I held around it. And I think I just, from that point, went into like execution to figure out like what we could do to prevent this from ever happening again. And I kind of used, a lot of things as like a coping mechanism. So I was kind of throwing myself into research, going to doctors. We right away at that point started to see a fertility doctor and did a bunch of tests and everything for recurring pregnancy loss. Ultimately, like they didn't find anything. It was kind of just they chalked it up to bad luck or maybe poor egg quality, which was, it's good that there wasn't a glaring issue, but it was also hard to sit with the fact that there wasn't anything wrong. So like, why is this happening again? Like, why is this happening to us? And that's actually the chapter of my book is, if nothing is wrong, then how do we fix it? There wasn't a clear path forward. Basically, the doctors were like, okay, you could do IVF because there's a possibility it would decrease your chance of miscarriage,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously it's not guaranteed. So you can also just try again naturally. So it was hard to make that decision because it wasn't like so cut and dry of like, this is the path that you should take. We did decide to do IVF, which again was a hard decision, but
Sure.
I think it was the one that our doctor kind of was leaning more towards for us. So we decided to give it a shot, and I feel very fortunate that it worked for us the first time around. So we went through IVF, the retrieval and the transfer early this year in January, and transferred in February. And very lucky to have my baby girl today, who was born a month ago today. So
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And I know the experience of an unexplained diagnosis always feels like what is wrong. And it is so amazing how far science has come in terms of what is known and what is understood.
Yeah.
Um, and still how vast that space of science that still needs to be discovered is,
Right.
because there is that feeling, well, if you're not finding anything wrong, then there must be nothing wrong, as opposed to the experience of just because we can't find something wrong doesn't mean there isn't something. We just don't have the science for it. So you're stuck in this
Yeah.
space where we're going to throw spaghetti at a wall because clearly something is wrong, because
Right.
something is happening or not happening,
Yeah.
but we still don't have scientific understanding of what the something is. And
Exactly.
so,
And it's a blind
dilemma.
spot. It's a
Yeah.
blind spot on fertility right now.
Yeah.
But because of that, I felt a lot of guilt around it. And I think that's a feeling that probably a lot of women can relate to, but just, not having a clear indication of why it was happening, you
Mhm.
kind of go into spirals of like, why
Sure.
me? So that's like something, I really dig into with my chapter, and I wrote a lot about in my journal. So
If you could take one takeaway from everything that you did to help yourself heal on this, and you can give a piece of advice to someone else who is looking to begin their journey of removing the self-blame and finding that healing,
yeah.
and granted, I understand that it's more than just one piece that goes into this journey, but for the sake of an Instagram live, what would be the most important piece that you would offer as this beacon of hope to others of trying something, or one or two things?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, what helped the most kind of shed that guilt was talking to other women or hearing other women's stories who had been through it and who had gone to the other side of it. I realized, I wasn't alone in it. So this wasn't just happening to me. And so when I could lean on those other stories, as you said, like a beacon of hope, I kind of used hope as a remedy for that self-guilt that I was feeling. So I find, that connection is really what helped me and what I would urge for others. It can be daunting, especially when you don't know anybody personally who's gone through anything like this. But whether it is, connecting with others through a support group or just reading a book like this where you can hear these stories, I think it does make a difference.
Definitely. And on the note of support group, a shout out that we do have a lot of incredible supportive spaces here at Yesh Tikva, including one tonight for those who are contemplating and pursuing donor conception, as well as those parenting, pregnant and parenting post-donor conception. So tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern is the first of the two groups, and then at 9 is the second. And let's talk for a couple more minutes about the book. Do you want to tell us how we can get this book and a little bit about the book itself?
Yeah, so it's available on Amazon or really wherever you purchase your books. We just launched in October, end of October, for Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month. So it's only been out for, I guess, just a little over a month. But it's, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's a compilation of stories from 9 of us. And I would say each of us has a very unique story.
Mhm.
So there's really something for everybody, whether you're going through your own fertility challenges or you just know somebody who is and you kind of want to know how to support them. I think that's also really important too.
Yeah.
So it's, like we said, it's really meant to be a beacon of hope for others and kind of break the stigma a little bit too around these topics and just help anybody who may be struggling with this and help them feel a little less alone.
That is so beautiful and so meaningful that you took your journey and turned it into something that could act as this recurring word throughout this live beacon of hope, and support, and something for others to lean on, especially when we're not yet ready, or in addition to connecting with others. It's a way to feel that connection, of knowing that even though it's 1 in 6, and sometimes you feel like the one.
Mm-hmm.
1 in 6 is really 20% of the population, and so many individuals who are experiencing this journey around the world. And that means in your backyard as well.
Yeah.
And until you meet them, just being able to know that they exist. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining today to share about the book and about your story, and to be this source of support for those in struggle, and those who are looking to love and support someone in struggle, and for sharing about the book. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd want to leave the Ishikva community with before we end?
Just know if you're going through it right now, it will get better. And just to, keep your head up. Like I said, find the resources that help you through that time, whatever's going to get you through it, whether it's the self-care, finding the right resources, just prioritize yourself. And, in the end, that's what's most important. So whatever you have to do to kind of get you through that time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.